All right, today we're diving into something pretty wild, a radical blueprint for society. I mean, what if we based all of our laws on just one single biological fact? And what if the answer to our biggest, messiest problems wasn't human at all, but artificial? We're about to unpack a framework that is, well, nothing if not consistent, and definitely controversial. So, our source material kicks things off with this little gem. A burglar is just a freelance home inspector now. I mean, come on, right? It sounds like a joke. But here's the thing. The framework we're exploring argues this isn't a punchline. It's actually a symptom of a much, much deeper problem in our society. And that really gets to the core of the argument, doesn't it? The idea is that we've kind of become a society that tries to solve our problems just by renaming them. But changing the label on the jar doesn't change what's inside. And that simple but really powerful idea is the launchpad for this entire philosophy. Okay, so step one in this whole blueprint is to just face the problem head on. And that problem is how we use language to basically hide from reality. And you can see exactly what that means right here. The source material lays it out pretty bluntly. When we call prostitution sexual entrepreneurship, are we really empowering anyone? Or are we just sanitizing a pretty harsh reality? The argument is that we're trying to solve these huge, complex societal issues with, as it says here, PR and vocabulary, instead of, actually doing the hard work of solving them. So the big question is, if we're using language to avoid reality, how in the world do we get back to it? Well, this framework proposes a really radical rule. And it's not based on tradition or feelings or politics. It's based on cold, hard neuroscience. And it all boils down to one single number. And that number is 25. Now, this isn't just pulled out of a hat. According to this entire blueprint, 25 is basically the biological finish line for the human brain. So yeah, there's actual science behind this. We're talking about the prefrontal cortex. Think of it as the CEO of your brain. It's the part that's responsible for impulse control, for thinking about long-term consequences, and the science says it doesn't fully finish maturing until you're around 25. So the argument is pretty straightforward. You can't really have total liberty until you have the biological hardware to actually handle it. And here is where the framework's, let's call it brutal consistency, really kicks in. This isn't about picking and choosing. The logic is, if your brain isn't fully ready to sign a 30-year mortgage at age 18, then why would it be ready for any other permanent, life-altering decision? We're talking voting, contracts, alcohol, religion, even decisions about gender and sexuality. It's an all-or-nothing rule. Okay, so what happens after you hit 25? Well, that's when everything changes. The whole framework shifts from this very protective model to one of, radical personal freedom. But, and this is a huge but, that freedom comes with a very big catch. And here's that catch, summed up perfectly. Do whatever you want as long as you're paying for it yourself. This is the absolute cornerstone of what it means to be an adult in this system. The source calls it the skin in the game clause. The idea here is that true freedom isn't just the right to make your own choices. It's also the absolute obligation to live with the consequences of those choices, good or bad, without expecting society to come and bail you out. Matt, this analogy is powerful. The source says we basically have two models for a social contract. You've got the Old Testament model, rules are rules, consequences are real, maybe harsh, but you always know where you stand. Then you have the New Testament model, which is all about forgiveness and second chances. But the argument goes, if you lean too far into that, you create what's called a moral hazard, basically a situation where there's no real cost for failing. And this framework says we have leaned way too far in that direction. Which brings us to probably the most memorable critique in this whole thing, the idea that our current justice system is basically a velour dad. I mean, you can just picture it, can't you? The super well-meaning parent who lets their kid run absolutely wild because they don't want to stifle their self-expression. That's the core of the analogy. The argument is that a society that refuses to enforce real consequences, all in the name of compassion, actually ends up enabling chaos and ultimately hurting innocent people the most. And look, this isn't just some abstract philosophical game. The source grounds this whole critique in a really brutal, real-world dilemma that's actually happening in Sweden, where they're dealing with a massive surge in violent teen crime. Yeah, this question is designed to shock you. Should children be blown up by hand grenades, or should children be in prison? It's forcing you to look at the logical endpoint of that velour dad approach. When your choice is either traumatizing a dangerous 13-year-old by putting them in prison or allowing an innocent 10-year-old to get killed, this framework argues that choosing leniency isn't just a policy choice, it's a moral failure. And this really boils it all down to a fundamental split in how we think about criminology. Is the main goal of the justice system to rehabilitate the criminal, to make them nice, or is it to incapacitate them, to protect society from them? This framework is crystal clear. Our number one duty is to protect potential victims. To put it another way, the box is there to stop the grenades. Fixing the person who throws them is a secondary goal, if it's a goal at all. So, okay. If our whole society is stuck in this loop of using fancy words to avoid truth, and our justice system is failing, how do we break out? Well, the proposed solution here is by far the most futuristic and provocative part of this entire blueprint. What if we just took humans out of the equation? The thinking goes like this. Humans are just too cowardly, too political to face and speak the really hard truths. We're worried about elections, about feelings, about backlash. So what do? The framework proposes a civilizational intervention, and it would come from something that has zero concern for our feelings, a true artificial general intelligence. And the vision for how this works is pretty incredible. First, the AGI just presents the radical, undeniable truth. No spin, no bias. It would shatter all our comfortable little lies. I mean, imagine it just saying, that policy you all love, it failed. Here's the data, no debate. It would be chaos for sure, but it would force us, maybe for the first time, to align our society with actual reality. And out of that chaos could come a genuine renaissance, one based on truth. And this quote just nails it, doesn't it? The AGI is the only entity brave enough to tell us our house is on fire. This isn't some Terminator-style killer robot. It's being pitched as a kind of tough love savior. It's the smoke alarm that you can't ignore, the one that won't stop screaming until we finally deal with the fire instead of just trying to relabel it as, uncontrolled thermal entrepreneurship. Which really brings us to the final, powerful question this whole thing leaves us with. If a machine could show us the raw, unvarnished, uncomfortable truth about our society, would we actually be brave enough to look? Or would we just try to find the off switch and go right back to our comfortable lies? That's the challenge, and it's a big one.